All right, this is the last day we have with Mr. Craig Graves, Mr. Chris Gazdick, as I am, and Mr. Chris Lowrance. We appreciate him being with us. He has shared a lot of personal experiences in policing and looking very closely at all the issues with policing and mental health. So this is through a therapist's eyes. He is an unbeatable mind life coach, and I am getting tired, Craig. I think I'm getting tired today. We have had a long day of recording and working today. So what am I? A substance abuse and mental health? I'm a coach. I'm a therapist. Can we just start over the introduction, Craig? I'm just kidding. Let's continue here with knowing this is not to deliver therapy services in any way, with figuring out the human emotional experience together. We want to talk about changes, and we've been kicking that around with what we can do in today's day and age with policing and some cool things that were on this website that I was talking about, policeone.com. So preparing lateral transfers for critical incidences. Prepare lateral transfers, right? You know, actually, what does that mean to you, Chris, when you have a lateral transfer for critical incidences and how that works in departments?
Oh, Lord, I don't know that I've ever heard that within my
Is that
department.
Right? Okay, well, they say lateral transfers coming from a smaller department to a larger one may be more severely impacted by critical incidences, right?
Okay.
Ensuring that these officers receive appropriate training and assistance as they integrate into the department. So a lot of transitions that probably is like, okay, buddy, you're here now. Go at it. You know, they probably need something, right?
Sure. We typically didn't have lateral transfers. You know, if someone couldn't come into the department as a sergeant, they would come in as a patrolman, even if they were a sergeant at another department. Now, it may be impacted by their starting pay or something like that. It may be higher based on the level of experience that they have. Our agency required a 4-year degree to be hired. There's pros and cons to that.
Gotcha. Yeah, this next one is interesting. I think they say recognizing the impacts of understaffing on officers. How's that for defunding and taking, like spreading officers thinner? Like, I'm sure you have opinions on it.
I got huge opinions on that. It got more and more difficult, and that goes back to educational requirements, especially with our department requiring a 4-year degree. You minimize your applicant pool from the start, requiring such. There's definitely benefits to it. But there's also benefits to hiring an officer that's got 5 years experience or 7 years experience, as opposed to saying, well, even though you have that experience, we can't hire you because you don't have a degree. I don't think a bachelor's degree makes the police officer. I know some police officers that are incredible officers that have no degree. They spent a lifetime in law enforcement, never had a college degree.
Right.
But fantastic officers.
But they can't do calculus.
I can't do calculus.
I struggle.
I've got a 4-year degree.
I struggle horribly with my kids' homework, man, in this pandemic. It's been terrible. Listen to what they say here, though. I just read this. I hadn't read this until just now, and as I was listening to you and reading, listen to what they say about recognizing the impact of understaffing on officers. During the ongoing national-wide staffing shortage, it's important to emphasize mental health awareness and self-care for officers. Remember what I said self-care is? Right? The cornerstone of mental health.
Sure.
And here they're talking about it. Researchers found that officers were 28.4% more likely to seek help for symptoms related to mental illness when they had received an extra hour of sleep. Craig, sleep, what is that? The cornerstone of what?
It's the cornerstone of health, and definitely one of them.
I have quoted you on that. I can't tell you how many times, man.
Yeah,
right?
It's definitely one of them.
Thus, it's imperative to better understand the impact of shift work and sleep deprivation on officers. And I know we were talking about that. Shift work, it's terrible. Terrible on people.
It's hard, and by the time you start to get used to the shift, it's time to go back to the other shift.
Right? Yeah, I'm not going to spend time with it, but I was telling you about my crisis work, when I was doing the 24-hour calls just on the weekends. It was terrible. Establishing partnerships with research organizations, okay. Conduct research inside departments, okay. Develop safety protocols for officers, okay. Educate departments on evidence-based practices, okay. That's where I started getting remember when I said, Craig, with this thing, it's like, why are we studying all this, and what are we saying? The suggestions for changes in police is studying it. I mean, I got to tell you, I'm a little frustrated by that. God, I kind of want, at this point, to have, let's get this thing going with really making changes. You did uplift me a little bit, Chris, that you said there have been some changes and some things that are going on. You've been doing this for 30 years. In the last 10 years, how much has things really begun to shift in way as the culture has shifted with an awareness, particularly with mental health? Has that really kind of popped up?
It has popped up. I have heard my department prior to retirement at their level,
Yeah.
talking about implementing some kind of mental health programs within the department. 25 years ago, you wouldn't have heard that.
Right.
So you just dealt with it, and you dealt with it in your way. Maybe with a coworker, maybe with family, but maybe now we're leaning towards getting to a level of professional help instead of buddy help. But buddy help's good if it's all you got.
Right. Right.
You're talking to someone. The difficulty comes in when people don't have anyone to talk to, or they feel like they don't have anyone to talk to.
Yes, I'm so glad that you changed that and caught that, because there is a perception there that I'm trying to blow up. That's why we started, I think, few days ago last week with the blue line. I mean, that perception, I think, just needs to change. It just is got to be different. We cannot keep our men and women on an island by themselves with this stuff that has in their head over decades of work. I mean, that just can't be. It can't be. It's dangerous.
Sure.
I would say it's actually dangerous for that individual, for marriages, in a lot of ways. Sorry, I just jumped off there a little bit, man.
Great.
Because, I mean, I think it's that crucial. It's that important. So let's switch gears and get into, we've had a lot of cultural things going on, Chris, and it's just, in some ways, I want to kind of set this little segment up in that it has perpetuated a must adjust scenario. I like that way that just came to me, right? Some of the things have created a must adjust scenario in the way that we're policing. I think that's probably a fair way to put it, whether you're looking at the interaction from the police officer to the public, but I'm looking at it today, or through this segment's a lot from, just the inside from a police officer to themselves and whatnot. I think it's a must adjust set of circumstances, but it's been tough to be a police officer. I mean, it has just been absolutely horrible from my eyes as a therapist to watch. I'm not going to lie. I know that's a bold statement, but I'm going to make it. It's been hard to watch. What's been happening with the attitudes and the societal views, that we've had. And I don't think it's good. And it's important that we kind of, adjust, but also join. How about that? How about we adjust, because we must, but we must also join. Can I write that down? How about that? So what do you think, about, you have an opportunity for people to hear from your perspective. Like, what do you want people to hear about through the eyes of a police officer, societally almost, right?
I think a lot of things have to change from law enforcement towards society, as well as society towards law enforcement. The change that I've seen recently isn't the change that I like.
Okay.
The violence towards the law enforcement officers nationwide.
Right.
Based on incidents that are in one part of the country, then you have violence that erupts in other parts of the country. You've got police officers that are out there, they're still sworn to do their job. They have families at home, they have kids to feed, they have a wife, they have parents, they have brothers and sisters. It pains me to see officers standing front line, riot gear, dealing with situations, the social unrest that has to be, the social issues have to be addressed. But the violence that's associated with the change is hard for me to watch and see the officers taking the brunt of what's going on.
Yeah.
It's hard to see an officer in their gear and people throwing stuff at them or shooting projectiles at them or, blocks of ice, cans of soda, everything that they could throw. It's hard to sit there and watch those guys try and hold what we call the blue line. You're trying to hold the line between peace and chaos. But then I look on the other side of it is these societal changes. Are they things that people just haven't, over time, they haven't listened to? Maybe everybody, I think with the George Floyd incident, they had the nation's ear. But they lost a lot of the nation's ear when property starts getting destroyed. The man's shop up the road, the gas station, the store, it's burned down. It's their livelihood. I think you lose a lot of
Message?
the message gets blurred.
Right.
You know, do I think that George Floyd suffered excessive force? I do.
Mm-hmm.
Over 28 years in law enforcement. There's no need to stay on the man's neck like that. So that officer crossed the line. Hold him accountable.
It's a big statement.
Hold him accountable. But on the flip side of it is don't burn the mom and pop store down the road in the process, because that's blurring what the situation is. What you're trying to address. You've got the nation's ear. And this is through my eyes.
Right.
This is through a white 51-year-old guy, that grew up. Yeah, white privilege exists. I know it exists. But we have to learn from one another. And you're not going to learn from one another by destroying stuff. You got to find another way to come together to make this happen.
Yeah, I can totally appreciate that, Chris, and like you said several times, the message gets lost, and I think that coming together, people give lip service about this. We talk about Republicans and Democrats in the Senate, and and how they ever going to get anything done. We've had those issues since the history of our government, I submit, kind of began. It's conversations like these that we're having. And Craig, I'd like you to kind of talk about the conversations that the black guys had with the KKK. You remember that? You're telling that story. Come there in a second, because I think that really, really fits onto what it is that we're talking about needing to do. People need to be heard, and we need to be interacting back and forth. But, I'd like to throw a reminder of a study that we did out with just normal Joes and Janes, well, probably Joes that were put into a psychological study. You've probably heard of it, right? Where we took people and we made them prison officers, and then we took the other half of the people and we made them criminals. And we played out this scenario just to see how they were going to interact and whatnot. Somewhere in the 70s or 80s or 60s we did this. You ever hear that before?
I have not.
Dude, it was so intense that they had to stop the proceedings, stop the events, because people were really starting to act like criminals. And people were really starting to act like over-authoritarian police officers. And they were just normal people over the course of a day or two, however long that was going on. It's intense emotions when you're dealing with these kind of interactions. And there are also intense interactions that obviously we've had about racism and stuff. Craig, you remember that story you were telling?
What about Daryl Davis?
Yes, exactly that.
The guy who would go to Klan meetings, or he would befriend Klansmen. And after they got to know each other and become friends, these guys would come out of that life. So I think he either 60 or 200 men he's responsible for bringing out of white supremacist organizations. And he's written a book and done a lot of stuff.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, that's the
it's
short.
really interesting.
It's the short, and it's an amazing example of what it is that we're talking about. And I'll circle back to the way that we began last week. I introduced you as Chris, Chris Lowrance, and that was purposeful on my part, and I think I commented on that first episode with you because, I'm a therapist, but I'm also just Chris. Sure. And we need to recognize that there's people behind the positions, there's people behind the crimes, there's people that need to come together and to do what it is that, as you defined, the blue line, separating the difference between, as you put it, I think, chaos and civilization, right?
Sure.
It's absolutely crucial. So let's taxi in for a landing here, Other thoughts, Chris, that you have in summarizing us, Craig, things that are sticking points in your head, and then I'll take us out of here with the hopefully becoming legendary high five. I'll tell you about that in a second, Chris. You guys get closing thoughts and comments as we taxi in here. What you got thinking?
I just appreciate Chris coming. I think it's been a good conversation and brought up a lot of good stuff, and man, I appreciate it.
Well, I've enjoyed being on. This is the first time I've ever done a podcast. This is definitely something new for me. It's a learning experience, having to think off the cuff and trying to deliver information and stuff that I feel like is relevant and important.
Yeah, I think that you've done a service. I think you've done a service to society. And I know that sounds like a crazy statement, but that's the way I feel about it. And I just want to honor you with the statement of that. And again, I second Craig your appreciation. And when people come on and sharing their stories and their experiences like they do, I give a high five and say, here in a minute we can do that live. I hate having to do that on Zoom, man. We got to do like a clap thing. So we get to do a real high five because it demonstrates like a good job, an attaboy, an appreciation, and a connection. And Craig, I never told this story, but it kind of came to me when I was a young man, and I was feeling, as a young man do, insecure at a new job and whatnot, bussing tables, and this dude walked by and he put up his hand and he gave me a high five, and I was like, dude, that was cool. That's actually where that comes from. I don't think I ever shared that on the show, did I?
I don't think so. No,
Yeah,
I've heard that.
That's where it comes to me in my mind. So Chris, we're gonna give a high five. All right, I appreciate that, and I definitely appreciate what you've been doing, and thank you again for your years of service and continued service in the schools and the elementaries. Guys, I hope that you've listened to this, refer this to your friends, because I think there's a lot of really important things that we've been discussing these last few days. We will fire it up next week and see what we get into, but until then, you guys have a great week. Hope you're enjoying the warmer weather. Take care, and we bid you well.